I'm going to talk about sanding and cleaning your polymer clay. I want to show you this little dial that I'm working on and show you, a little more light, show you where you start to get some discoloration and you'll get little bits of lint and things like that in the surface of the clay. And what you're going to want to do is actually sand that off of the clay before you do your finishing. Now, I have some of the other limb parts, and I think, make sure it's clear that you can see it. I've started sanding, but there's still a lot of lint and things like that on the piece. And there's a lot of options available for sanding. I just grabbed some to show you some of the things that I use. You have wet dry sandpaper, and you can get this at most hardware stores. It comes in sheet form, and you can fold it over and use the strength of the paper itself to go ahead and sand. It's not always as effective, and you can waste a lot of paper that way. Or you can cut a piece and you can glue it to something like this. Any kind of soft, flexible plastic piece works because you can wrap it around. It also protects your hands from the heat, from the friction. Insulates you a little bit. You can get pre-boarded sanding pieces. They sell these in a lot of like wood crafting stores and places like that. It's not hardcore. It's more flexible, so again, you can wrap it around things, but it insulates your hands from the friction heat. There are sponge pieces like this that have a similar paper to this attached to the sponge. Again, it insulates your hands from the heat of the friction, and it gives you the ability to press down on the surface a little harder without getting burned from the heat. You can also wet sand with these. The advantage, again, to the sponge can hold water. So as you're sanding, you're also rinsing, and you can go to the water and bring it to the piece instead of having to have the piece actually in the water, which, if you don't have back problems, sanding it over the sink is the ideal way to do it. But anybody who has back problems knows why you're going to end up with a little bucket, a little short table, and a bucket. If you use a short table, then you don't have to have your arms up in the air the whole time you're doing it at a funny angle. But it comes in all sorts of different grits, everything from a really coarse to a really fine that when you touch it you are almost surprised that that's supposed to be sandpaper. And you use this depending on how much material you need to remove. You can dry sand, but the advantage to the wet dry is that this will rinse off of the sandpaper and not clog the paper as you're working. If the polymer material clogs the sandpaper, then it becomes less effective. You can see I've just been real quick sanding and how it starts to clog the paper. And you don't have to be gentle with well-baked clay because it's going to be pretty sturdy. Now you can see that what you're going to want to do is sand with a coarser paper. Get yourself to where you've gotten rid of the majority of your surface issues. And if, as you're seeing right here, you start to see patches of a different color clay, what that is your surface was not perfectly smooth. It looked that way, but it wasn't. And what you want for that is one like this. This has a hard core down the center of it that makes it pretty rigid, kind of more like an emery board. And you can take that and go, again, this should be wet, but for demoing it, you can go over that same area in gentle circles and take down the high points, because this won't push itself down into the low points. You can take the high points off and go slow and keep looking back at your surface. Make sure you're not taking too much. But what you do is you get rid of that two-tone color and get your surface perfectly smooth by sanding the high points down until they're the same height as the low points, like that. Okay, and then go back with something that is not as coarse, because well, that one's very coarse, and sand that area again. And there you go. No more two-tone. That is all the same height. And what you want to do is get to where you're down to, like this paper comes in a 400 grit, which can literally, I mean, you can get it in a 600 even. It literally will smooth this to a glass-like finish. It will be that smooth when you're done. Absolutely polished smooth. Now, when you're all done with those things, like I said, you have a lot of options on sanding. If you have a place where you need to take more material away than the piece is wanting to give up with the options that you have available, there are Dremel tools. Lots and lots of different Dremel sanding tools that you can use, and you want to start apparently on a slow speed and start slowly grinding. You can see this was the finish when I was done sculpting, and then this is the finish after I hit it with the Dremel tool. So it roughs it up pretty good, but you can, once you get it to the shape that you want and you've removed the bulk of what you wanted to remove, which I'm still working on this one, then you go back and you take your other tools again and you start sanding that smooth. And sanding is a patience game. It doesn't happen instantaneously. You have to go step by step. You start with one grit and you get it as smooth as you can with that one. And try not to make more marks than you're removing by staying in linear strokes. You want to kind of work in little circles once you get past any bulky removal that you wanted to do. That's a nice fine one. Take it all the way down to your finest paper. Okay, there's that. And you want to use a soft rag and just wipe the dust away. All right, we have a smoother surface again. And the last step that I always do after sanding anything that needed it, I take cotton swabs, Q-tips, and acetone. Now the trick with acetone, one, it is a toxic thing to be breathing, so you want to work in a well ventilated area. There we go. If you're working in a closed studio like I am, it's winter, so I cannot open a window. What you want to do is turn on a fan, not blowing on your work, but on you, so that it blows the fumes away from you. You want to get the Q-tip wet, but you don't want it dripping. If it's dripping, just roll it inside the edge of the container and get the excess off. And then put that cap back on slightly. Okay, and then you're going to take your piece that you were working on, and you have this slight discoloration from where it was sanded to where it wasn't sanded. And the acetone, you're going to wipe, without turning it, the surface of the piece and kind of let it wet the surface. And then if you have surface dirt still that you need to remove, you hit that spot, and then you rotate the Q-tip and you pick the spot up. Now, I hope you can see that, but the Q-tip is actually dirty and the piece is not. You do that in another spot, the same thing happens. You get to a certain point, and now the whole Q-tip is dirty, and you discard it. You pick up another one, go back to the acetone, dip it, and you go again. Now this can be done without sanding. And what you don't want to do is blow on it. So I'm trying to keep it out of the fan. Drying it too fast, I hope you can see the dirt lifting off of this. Think when you remove nail polish, that's basically what you're doing. You want to wipe it and remove it from the surface and not let the dirty part of it touch the nail again, because it'll just smear it. You want to get down to a clean nail, so you keep using a clean rag until it's clean. And you can clean a good bit of your dirt off this way. And I don't know if you can tell, but I am slowly turning this Q-tip, twisting it ever so slightly. You've got a dirt spot, you can focus on it for a minute, a little extra agitation, and then go ahead, twist it, and move on. Now you can clean the entire surface of your doll with acetone. You are going to use a lot of Q-tips. The average doll that I do, when I haven't been careful and kept it lint free, I will use anywhere from 20 to 30 Q-tips. You can reduce the number that you're using by cutting them in half ahead of time and using like a small shot glass to pour the acetone into. And you only need a small amount. And if you have a shot glass that you can put a little dish over so it doesn't evaporate as you're using it, even better. A small amount, you'd be surprised. It's like a soda cap full is about all you use for the entire doll. And then when you're done, you have a nice smooth clean surface again. And that's about it. on how I clean dirt off of my dolls. Some dirt is a little deeper than just on the surface, and those you pretty much have to sand out. Some that got in there when you were conditioning, like this dark streak right here, this probably is not going to come out even with me sanding it. That is probably perspiration, and it discolors the clay. Most likely happened when I was conditioning it. Maybe I didn't wash my hands well enough on that little batch that I conditioned. But that's sanding and using acetone very quickly, and I hope that it helps. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the video section below, or the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Okay, and the final thing is when you are trying to sand around something like eyes. All right, one of the other things I want to cover, one of the advantages to picking up some of this thin sheet sandpaper, as you can see this one is a 600, is that you can take and roll it. And in rolling it, what you're doing is creating a tiny little sandpaper finger, like, so that you can get into little grooves. And you only want to do this with your really fine paper. You don't want to use, this one's actually a little too thick, a really thin little roll, but it allows you to get around eyes. Let me see if I can. Like if you have a little nub or something around an eye that you want to get rid of, you can sand right down into that with this. You can soften it and put a curve to it like that. And that lets you get in the contours. And you want to make sure that you're not using the corner to scrape. This was just a little practice head. I wanted to try to do a really complicated expression. And my friend Kenshiro was making this kooky face, and I decided now there would be a hard face to sculpt. So I went ahead and sculpted it. And yes, I practice because expressions are complicated. And a lot of times I do a more static expression for just that reason. The more expressive the face, the more complicated it is, because you've got muscle groups that are altered. You've got whole portions of anatomy that can be altered. The height of the brows, the shape of the nostrils. When somebody makes an angry face, or if they smile, their nose flares out or crinkles up, or they have bunchy skin around the eyes that they don't normally have. But there was my tip for around the eyes. You make yourself a little finger shape. See how it's rounded like our finger is? Out of the roll or the flat paper. You just roll it over a couple of times just to give it a little rigidity. And you can soften the edge, actually. Almost forgot this tip myself. You can soften the edge so that it's not so harsh by rubbing your sandpaper on another piece of sandpaper, and that softens up the paper itself, which is what's going to scratch your doll. And then you can get into those little areas And you want to be careful as you're doing it, not to do too much. But you can get in there and take down a big blemish that you don't want there and sand it away. And then you can go back and use your acetone to finish that. But yeah, that was Kenny. That was quite a face. Okay, that's it for now. Until next time, this is Linda Ehrenfried with sculpting tips.